Guten Erev Shavi Pesach. We're almost into the final days of Passover. The seventh day is a full holiday like the first 2 days, and so is the eighth day, right, outside of Israel. So we have 2 days that are complete Yom Tov at the beginning of Pesach and 2 days at the end of Pesach. When it's just like Shabbos, except that cooking is allowed, right? That's the standard rules of Yom Tov, of Chag, of a festival. We don't do work, but cooking is allowed and the things that are necessary for cooking, and that begins tonight. So we'll enjoy 7th and 8th day Passover. So starting tonight, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are holidays. We won't have class neither on Wednesday nor Thursday, and we'll resume again with the regular schedule Friday at noon, like we always do, Friday at noon. Are you enjoying your Passover? It's going by pretty quickly. I must say. I made some matzah pizza yesterday for the first time. Not everyone does. Some people don't make matzah pizza, don't have matzah ball soup, right? And that's called non-gebrocht. It's kind of a higher level of kashrus, just making sure that even matzah, which of course, matzah is kosher for Passover. Not all matzah is kosher for Passover, but even if you take matzah that is kosher for Passover, if you mix it with liquid, if you get it wet, like with tomato sauce, or you make a matzah ball out of it, so there's a chance that it can rise. And so some people are machmir, they're more stringent. The Lubavitch movement is like that, right? They're non-gebrochs, so they don't eat matzah ball soup during Passover, although I believe on the 8th day they can. Nor would they eat matzah pizza, but we're not at that level of stringency. However, we didn't have an oven, right? We koshered our oven for Passover, but it's a meat oven. And our dairy toaster oven is not available for Passover, so I couldn't make my matzah pizza in the oven. So what did I do? I made it in a pan. And I gotta say, it was great. I never did matzah pizza in a pan before, and it worked out great. Highly recommended if you eat gebrochts on Pesach. Who's in the house? Looks like people were not expecting our show at 1 p.m. today. A little bit of an unusual time. But Marjorie's in the house from Georgia, Aoife from Florida, Marie in Freeport. And Aoife's telling me my son made matzah pizza this morning for breakfast. It's so enjoyable, right? I saw a video online of a guy says, so level 1 matzah pizza, you take your piece of matzah, you put some tomato sauce from the jar, some grated cheese, from the packet. Kosher for Passover, of course, but, that's it. And you bake it. Level 2, you chop up your onions, your garlic, your pepper. You make your tomato sauce, your marinara, either totally from scratch, or you just add, the browned, fried a little bit, tomatoes and garlic and pepper, and add the tomato sauce to that. And then what else did he do? And then, he grated the cheese himself, and then added a second type of cheese grated, chopped up some basil. That looked really good. Maybe I'll have to do a level 2 matzah pizza. At any rate, over here on the Facebook side, Shandora checking in from the Bronx. Paula, are we alone? Nope, some of the gang is here. Okay, thank God. I'll tell you, the people who are going to make it up later, and Catherine checking in from Virginia, the people who are going to make it up later, they're going to enjoy it, and the people who are here live, and you can comment and ask questions, fantastic. This is an awesome daf. Absolutely awesome daf. Every page of the Talmud is awesome in its own way, but sometimes they're technical and difficult to understand what's going on, and we have to really apply ourselves. And sometimes there's just a lot of beautiful, elevated spiritual teachings, stories from the Bible, where it's just a little bit easier to connect in an emotional way. And that's today's daf. So we are in Tractate Sotah, the 18th volume of the Talmud. Generally, these are the laws of the suspected adulteress. We are in chapter 1. Our daf today is Yud, daf Yud, page 10. We're continuing our discussion of Mishna number 6 here in chapter 1. And the general concept we've been doing, which is a little bit of digression from the laws of the Sotah, although this basic idea that the suspected adulteress, even if she's innocent of committing adultery, she put herself in a compromised position, right? Her husband warned her, do not seclude yourself with this particular guy. He warned her in front of witnesses, and then she secluded herself with that guy in front of witnesses. The witnesses saw that she was secluded with this, alleged lover of hers. So, okay, she didn't actually commit adultery with him. The bitter water in the temple, we haven't had this in 2,000 years, but when the temple was standing, the bitter water was available, and that could prove her innocence. Nonetheless, it's going to be a humiliating experience, and the Mishna has been commenting that it's measure for measure, right? She put herself in an inappropriate situation publicly. It was done in front of witnesses. And now, that procedure, the Sotah procedure at the temple is another public procedure. And it's humiliating. It's certainly one that everyone would wish to avoid. So there's this idea of measure for measure. And having brought up the idea of measure for measure, punishment and reward for our actions, we've been on a bit of a digression going in and out of the law of Sotah, but looking at some other areas of the Bible, other stories in the Bible, in which we see that somebody is rewarded or punished measure for measure, commensurate with their actions. And we've been spending some time, we're going to continue with the story of Samson, right? So Samson, famous for being incredibly strong, superhuman strength, kind of like a biblical superhero. And his kryptonite, as it were, was that he was a Nazir. So when Delilah got him to spill the beans on what is the source of his strength, it said he's never had wine, right? We know what a Nazir is, and he's never cut his hair from birth. And so she cuts off his hair, his strength is gone, and now the Philistines are able to defeat him. But we should note that Samson was a more complex character than just a kind of strong man, he-man. He was also the judge of Israel for many years. So he possessed tremendous wisdom in order to judge cases, right? This is in the area of the judges before there were kings. And so he was essentially the ruler of Israel. But he was called a judge, not a king, because he judged them, right? He presided over them and issued judgments. And that took a tremendous amount of wisdom, and he possessed that. However, he succumbed to his temptation, right? He was attracted to non-Jewish Philistine women, and they were his undoings, right? So that which he was attracted to, which was inappropriate for him, ended up being his undoing in the form of Delilah. So we continue learning about Samson. We pick this up near the top of page 10a. The verse states, "And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson," right? So his mom, his parents were wishing for a son, couldn't have a son. And then they had a son, and, sort of like they said, well, if we would have a son, we will dedicate him, we'll consecrate him from birth. And that's how I think the angel made them promise to do that, right? I should have reviewed the story of Samson, but definitely the angel told her, from before birth, he shall be a Nazir, right? So this was commanded to his parents. And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. We read this story at Judges 13:24. Now the Gemara asks, with what did he bless him, right? With what did God bless Samson? And Rav Yehuda says that Rav says it means that he blessed him. I'm just read what it says. It means that Rav Yehuda says that Rav says it means that he blessed him with regard to his penis. And that despite his youth, his penis should function like that of physically mature men, and that his seed should be like an overflowing river. Now, what kind of a blessing is this? That he's what, like so well endowed and so capable of performing sexually at a high level from a young age? What kind of a blessing is that? Now, the reason that Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav, is looking, for some kind of a blessing that God, gave to Samson. I mean, we know about the strength, right? But the strength is not what's indicated here. Now, normally when the Lord blesses someone, Rav Steinsaltz points out, what is it that you're blessed with? Like Abraham was blessed by the Lord. And he was blessed in 3 areas, and this is what you're normally blessed with if this Bible says that God blessed this person. Wealth, long life, lots of children, right? So that his seed would carry on this righteous tradition. Samson had none of these, right? Samson had none of these. He was not a rich man. He was not a particularly rich man. He certainly did not have a long life, and he did not have children. So what was he blessed with? Well, with this capacity. Now, prior to Samson's death, the verse states, "And Samson called unto the Lord and said, Lord God, remember me, I pray to you, and strengthen me, I pray to you, only this once." Right? This was after he had told Delilah what the source of his strength is. She had had his hair cut. The Philistines came in, captured him, gouged out his eyes, right? The eyes that he used to set on, these Philistine women that attracted him. The Philistines themselves gouged out his eyes, and he was a prisoner. But, in the end, right, he brings the walls tumbling down in that Philistine temple. And so this is just prior to that episode where he's praying, God, give me strength one more time. I pray to you, strengthen me, I pray to you, only this once, O God, that I may be this once avenged of the Philistines. Some say Philistines. The Philistines for my 2 eyes. Judges 16:28. So Rav said that Samson said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, remember on my behalf the 22 years that I judged the Jewish people without receiving any reward. And I did not even say to any one of them, move a stick for me from one place to another place. Right? He presided over the Jewish people for 22 years as a judge. Right? That's the part of the Samson story that we don't often remember. But he was a very fine, righteous individual in that sense. But it was his undoing that he couldn't, direct his eyes where they should be directed. So the verse states earlier, and Samson went and caught 300 foxes. This is one of the mighty deeds that Samson did earlier in his prime. Right? He went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches and turned tail to tail and put a torch in the midst between every 2 tails. Judges 15:4. And the Gemara asks, what is different about foxes than any other animal that he chose them for this purpose? And Rabbi Ivu bar Nagdi says, that Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, Samson said, let the animal that goes in reverse when it tries to escape, i.e. the fox, come and exact punishment from the Philistines who reneged on their oath that Abimelech swore to Abraham, right? So Abimelech was the king of the Philistines, and in Abraham's generation, and at that time, they made peace. Abraham and Abimelech were at peace, and they made a pact that the 2 nations should stay at peace. But later, the Philistines broke that promise, hundreds of years later, and they attacked, and now Samson, and the Philistines were oppressing the Jewish people, and Samson arose to, push them back and really strike them a mighty blow. And it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Shimon the Pious, right, Rabbi Shimon HaHasid, said the width between the shoulders of Samson was 60 cubits, as it is stated. And Samson lay till midnight and arose at midnight and grabbed hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts and plucked them up, bar and all, put them upon his shoulder and carried them up to the top of the mountain that is before Hebron. And the verse indicates that the width of the gate of the city of Gaza was equal to the width of Samson's shoulders. And it is learned as a tradition that the doors of the gate of Gaza were no less than 60 cubits wide. Now, with regard to Samson's capture, the verse states, and the Philistines laid hold on him and put out his eyes, And they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass. And he did grind in the prison house. Judges 16:21. So Rabbi Yochanan says, grinding is nothing other than a language of a transgression, meaning of sexual intercourse. And so the verse says, then, says Job, chapter 31, verse 10, then let my wife grind onto another man. And this teaches that each and every Philistine man brought his wife to the prison in order that she should be impregnated by Samson. And Rav Papa said this is an example of the folk saying that people say, before a wine drinker, bring wine. Before one who digs in the ground, bring figs. So too, Samson, who married Philistine women, was brought more Philistine women while in prison. Right? You can see that this is not a wholesome people, the Philistines. You could say there's an aspect of cleverness, that they want their wives to be impregnated by the most superhumanly strong man who ever lived. But, kind of gross. They would want some other man than themselves to impregnate their wives, according to this teaching. And interesting that this word grind, same word, right? Like grinding spices, which in the modern English vernacular, has come to mean some kind of sexual activity, it was understood by the sages in the same way. And Rabbi Yochanan says, with regard to anyone who commits adultery, his wife commits adultery against him, as it is stated, Job 31:10, 31:9, if my heart has been enticed unto a woman, and I have lain in wait at my neighbor's door, and it is written, then let my wife grind unto another man, and may strangers kneel over her. And this explains the folks saying that people say, he is found among the pumpkins, kare, and his wife among the zucchinis, butsine, which are similar types of vegetables. In other words, she acts the same way he does. If the husband cheats on the wife, he shouldn't be too surprised if the wife cheats on the husband. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Samson judged the Jewish people as their Father in heaven does, with complete justice. You see what I'm telling you? Samson was not just, the strongest guy who rose to the position of judge because other people couldn't beat him up. No, he was a righteous, wise judge who judged the Jewish people for 22 years. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan is saying Samson judged the Jewish people even as their Father in heaven judges them, with complete justice. As it is stated, Dan shall judge his people, right? Dan was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Some pronounce it Dan. But Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel, Genesis 49:16, which is interpreted to mean that Samson, who is from the tribe of Dan, judges his people just as God, who is one. And Rabbi Yochanan says Samson, in Hebrew Shimshon, is called by the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he, as it is stated, for the Lord God is a sun, Shemesh, and a shield. And the Gemara comments, if that is so, then his name should not be erased, just like other sanctified names are not erased. If you're saying that the name Shimshon is actually one of the names of God, and Samson was just used one of the names of God as his name, well, then when we encounter the name Shimshon, it should not be erased, just like we would not erase a name of God. But rather, he is not called by the name of God, but his name is akin to the name of the Holy One, blessed be he. For just as the Holy One, blessed be he, protects the entire world, so too Shimshon, Samson, in his generation, protected all the Jewish people. So he possesses an attribute of the Holy One in the sense that he protects his people, but his name is not a holy name. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Bilam, right, the prophet, the non-Jewish prophet, Bilam was lame in one of his legs, as it is stated with regard to him, and he went limping, Shephi. Numbers 23:3. Samson was lame in both of his two legs, as it is stated when Jacob mentioned the tribe of Dan in the prophecy that pertained to Samson. He referred to him as Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake, Shephifon, in the path, which is a double shefi, meaning doubly lame. Right, so they're kind of just getting into the weeds on what these names could mean etymologically. We don't have a tradition other than this, as far as I know, that Samson was lame in his legs. New subject. The sages taught in a Baraisa, 5 individuals were created with a characteristic that is akin to a representation of the one on high, and they were all stricken by that characteristic. Samson was glorified in his strength, Saul in his neck, Absalom in his hair, Zedekiah in his eyes, and Asa in his feet. Right? These were all powerful attributes that are likened to the powerful attributes, infinitely more powerful, but still compared, sort of reminds us of these similar attributes of God. But in the end, these attributes, which glorified these people in their lifetimes, ended up being their downfall. And the Gemara clarifies. Samson was stricken by his strength, which led to his demise, as it is written, and she, Delilah, made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and had the 7 locks of his head shaved off, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. Saul, King Saul, was smitten in his neck, as it is written. Then said Saul to his armor bearer, draw your sword, and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through, and make a mock of me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it, and he fell with his neck upon his sword. Absalom, David's son, was stricken in his hair, as we will state later. Zedekiah was stricken in his eyes, as it is written, and they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him in fetters, and carried him to Babylon. Asa was stricken in his feet, as it is written. Now, the rest of all the acts of Asa, and all his might, and all that he did, and the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? But in the time of his old age, he was diseased in his feet. 1 Kings 15:23. And Rav Yehuda says that Rav says this indicates that gout, podagra, grabbed hold of him. And Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Nachman, said to Rav Nachman, what are the circumstances of gout? What pain does it involve? And he said to him, it feels like a needle inserted into living flesh. And the Gemara asks, from where did he know this? And the Gemara answers, well, some say that he himself suffered from this condition, and some say that he heard it from his teacher, and some say that he knew it through divine inspiration. As it is stated, we've seen this teaching before, the secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and his covenant to make them know it, right? That one who studies Torah at a deep, deep level will come to know things that are outside of his own personal experience, but he'll be sort of like it's not that you become prophets if you're a very high-level Torah scholar, but you're able to perceive things in the world in a way that other people cannot. Now, Rava taught, for what reason was Asa punished in his feet? Because he made Torah scholars perform forced labor, angaria, as it is stated, then King Asa made a proclamation unto all Judah, none was exempted, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and the timber thereof, with which Baasa had built, and King Asa built with them Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Now the superfluous expression unto all indicates that the proclamation was issued to everyone, including Torah scholars. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the next phrase in the verse, none was exempted, ein naki? And Rav Yehuda says that Rav says this includes even a bridegroom from his chamber and a bride from her canopy. As the verse states, with regard to a bridegroom, he shall be free, naki, for his house 1 year, right? So one who is just married doesn't go to war. He gets 1 year to enjoy life with his wife before he could be drafted into the army. Now, it is written with regard to Samson, and Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. And it is written in the Torah passage concerning the incident of Judah and Tamar. And it was told to Tamar, saying, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. And the verses contain an apparent contradiction as to whether Timnah was a place to which one must descend or a place to which one must ascend. And Rabbi Elazar says these terms do not refer to the manner of traveling to Timnah, but are used figuratively concerning Samson, who was disgraced there in Timnah through his attraction and copulation with a Philistine woman. So he descended to Timnah. Concerning Judah, who was elevated there, the term indicating ascent is written with regard to his journey. And Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says differently. There were two cities named Timnah. One was reached by descent into a valley, and one was reached by ascent. And Rav Papa said differently. There was only one Timnah, and it was located on the slope of a mountain. So one who came from this side reached it by descent, and one who came from that side reached it by ascent. And the Gemara presents examples of such cities, right? Depending on what direction you come from, you might be climbing or descending to get there. Vardonia and Bevarai and the market of Neresh. And the verse states with regard to Tamar, right? The incident of Judah and Tamar. So she was married to Judah's son. And he died before they had children. So, this is kind of this before the Torah was given, but they had the same concept of Yibum, that his brother would step into the place of his older brother and marry the widow, and the first child would, become an heir to the son the brother who died without having a child. But the second son also died after marrying Tamar. It was through no fault of hers. Both of these guys were problematic, right? Er and Onan. And so now Judah had a third son, Shelach, and she, was waiting for them to give her the third son so she would marry him. And then, he would perform Yibum for both of his brothers, and she would have a husband. But, Judah and his family were a little concerned. Is this a woman, whoever marries her dies? I don't want to give her my youngest son. And so she was stuck, sort of like an Aguna, waiting for a husband, not free to marry others, waiting for this young man to be old enough to marry her. But even when he was old enough, they weren't sending him over to her. So what did she do? She fooled Judah himself, right? And sort of put on the clothes of a harlot, attracted him. He went into her, got her pregnant. And he didn't know that it was his daughter-in-law when he did that, because her face was hidden. And then later, it turns out, she's pregnant, and people think that she committed adultery. And so he says, oh, well, then she has death penalty is how we deal with this kind of situation. And rather than embarrass him publicly, right, she sent, the staff and signet that he left with her when she pretended to be a harlot. And she said, I am pregnant by the owner of these items. Do you know who that is? And she said that privately with a messenger to Judah. And he's like, oh, she is more righteous than I. I am that man. And she didn't humiliate me, right? And so he ends up marrying her. And they produce twin boys, and one of them is the ancestor of King David, right? So that's the story that we're talking about now. So the verse states with regard to Tamar, and she put off from her the garments of her widowhood and covered herself with her veil and wrapped herself, and she sat in the entrance of Enaim, which is by the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelach was grown up, and she was not given unto him to wife. So the Amoraim dispute the meaning of the word Enaim. Rabbi Alexandri says, this teaches that she went and she sat at the entrance of the home of Abraham, our forefather, a place that all eyes hope to see it, as she was certain that Judah would pass there. And Rabbi Hanin says, that Rav says, it is a place called Enaim. And similarly, the verse states in the list of cities in Eretz Yisrael, in the portion of Judah, Tupa and Inam. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says, no, you're misunderstanding this word Enaim. She provided eyes, Enaim, for her statements, i.e. with her words, she provided an opening, a petach, for Judah to solicit her. And when Judah solicited her to engage in sexual intercourse with him, he first attempted to verify her status and said to her, are you perhaps a Gentile? And she said to him, I am a ger, I'm a convert. And he asked, perhaps you are a married woman? And she said to him, I am an unmarried woman. And he asked, perhaps your father accepted betrothal for you and you are unaware of it. And she said to him, I am an orphan. And he asked, perhaps you are impure. And she said to him, I am pure. I'm not tameh. Right? She's just a widow awaiting her yavam. But the Gemara discusses Abraham's house. And it is written, and he planted an eshel in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Genesis 21:33. And Reish Lakish says this teaches that Abraham made an orchard and planted in it all kinds of sweet things. Now the Tanaim, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah, disagree as to the meaning of the word eshel. One said that it means an orchard, pardes, and one said that it means an inn, pundak. And the Gemara, like an inn, like a hotel. And the Gemara continues, granted, according to the one who said that it means an orchard, this is what is written. And he planted, and this is suitable language for an orchard. But according to the one who said that he opened an inn, what is the meaning of the phrase, and he planted? And the Gemara answers, as it is written, and he shall plant, Vayita, the tents of his palace between the seas and the beauteous holy mountain, and he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel 11:45, indicating that the word Vayita, and he planted, is also used to indicate pitching tents. Now the verse there states, and he planted an eshel in Beersheba, and called there Vayikra on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Reish Lakish said, do not read this word literally as Vayikra, and he called, but rather as Vayakri, and he caused others to call. And said this little digression, right? We were learning about Samson, and then we were learning about Judah and Tamar, because Tamar might have gone by the place where Abraham's tent was. Now we're doing a little digression within the digression to learn about Abraham. And now we have this wonderful teaching about Abraham, right? Not so much that Abraham called out to God, but that Abraham caused others to call out to God, right? He brought other people close to God. How did he do this? This teaches that Abraham, our forefather, caused the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, to be called out in the mouth of all passers-by. How so? After the guests of Abraham ate and drank, Abraham was famous throughout that region as a person of immeasurable hospitality. You could always count that if you went by Abraham's tent, he would invite you in and give you to eat and drink. Famous for his hospitality. So after the guests of Abraham ate and drank, they arose to bless him. And he would say to them, but did you eat from what is mine? Rather, you ate from the food of the God of the world. Therefore, you should thank and praise and bless the one who spoke and the world was created. And in this way, Abraham caused everyone to call out to God. And remember how revolutionary that was, because Abraham lived in a world of idolaters. People who believed there were many gods and that they could be pacified by offering sacrifices to, idols, right? Physical representations of those make-believe gods. But he said, no, there is only one God in the world. He's blessed all of us. He's blessed me with this food that I share with you. So if you'd like to express gratitude, bless the Holy One above. And they did. So the Gemara continues its discussion of the incident of Judah and Tamar. Now it is written, when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Genesis 38:15. Now the Gemara asks, because she had covered her face, he thought her to be a prostitute? Prostitutes usually uncover their faces in order to attract men. This is a wonderful question, right? We read that she disguised herself as a prostitute. But this was a place and time where modest women covered their faces. And it was immodest, right, loose women, harlots, prostitutes, that would uncover their faces in order to attract men. Now, she obviously couldn't do that. Her father-in-law knew what she looked like. So how is it that the Bible, the Torah, says that she disguised herself as a harlot by covering her face? What does that mean? So Rabbi Lazar says, the verse means that Tamar covered her face in the home of her father-in-law, Judah, right? He never saw her face because she was always modest around her father-in-law when she was married to those two older boys before they died. Now, therefore, he did not recognize her when her face was uncovered, right? When she was uncovered as a prostitute, he didn't recognize her because her face had always been covered when she was at his house. Now, as Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, that Rabbi Yonasan says, any daughter-in-law who is modest in the house of her father-in-law merits that kings and prophets emerge from her. And from where do we derive this? From Tamar. Prophets emerge from her, as it is written, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz. Kings emerge from her, as seen from David and Solomon, etc. And Rabbi Levi says this matter is a tradition that we receive from our ancestors. Amoz, the father of Isaiah, and Amaziah, the king of Judea, were brothers. And this indicates that Isaiah was also from the house of David, and therefore also a descendant of Tamar. Now, the verse describes Tamar's court hearing. When she was brought forth, right, when they saw that she was pregnant and they thought that she had played, the adult, she wasn't an adulteress, right? She was a widow. But because she was a widow awaiting her Yavam, that's why she was not permitted to any other man. Now, this is before the Torah was given, but nevertheless, it was the custom in that place that a widow who was awaiting to be married to the next brother in line or to the father of the two boys that died after they married her, either one works, but until they marry her or release her, she's not free to be with other men. And since she became pregnant, that's why they, say that she has been defiled, right, and brought disrepute on the family. So when she was brought forth, Mutzet, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child? Genesis 38:25. Now the Gemara comments, it should have stated, when she was mitutzet. The word mutzet also carries the implication of being found. What then is taught by the use of the term? And Rabbi Lazar says, after her signs, which she was using to prove that she was impregnated by Judah himself, after those signs were brought out, the evil angel Samael came and distanced them from each other in an attempt to prevent Judah's admission and Tamar's survival, which would enable the birth of King David. The angel Gabriel then came and moved the signs closer again. Therefore, the word mutzet is used as it alludes to the signs being found again. Again, the signs were that when he slept with her, he didn't have money to pay her because she was playing a prostitute. And she said, no problem, just leave me your staff and signet ring. I think he even said, I'll leave you my staff and signet ring and come pay you later. And she said, okay. Now the Gemara comments, this is as it is written, for the leader upon Yonat Elim Rechokim, a psalm, Michtam of David. That's Psalm 56. Now Rabbi Yochanan says the verse means, from the moment that her signs were distanced, Rechokim, and she became like a mute dove, Yonah Elemet, and the phrase, a psalm, Michtam of David, means the one from whom David emerged as he was modest, mach, and flawless, tam, with everyone. Alternatively, Michtam indicates that makato, the place on his body that would have required wounding, maka, was complete, tama, i.e. that David was born circumcised. Alternatively, Michtam indicates that just as in his youth David made himself small in front of one who was greater than him in order to learn Torah from that person, so too when he became great and was crowned king, he still behaved in this manner, so that his modesty, mach, was complete, tam, all of his life, right? So this word Michtam, which is another synonym for psalm, also has this beautiful implication that David was somebody who, even when he was crowned king, did not become full of himself, right? He remained humble, at least humble before God, was always looking to learn Torah from others who knew more Torah than he. Was the sweet singer of Israel. I mean, there's a reason why King David is understood to be the forebear of the Messiah when the Messiah comes, right? He'll be a descendant of David. Perhaps even an incarnation of David, although I'm not saying that's not a teaching that I'm citing right now, but definitely that the Mashiach will be a son of David, a descendant of King David. Now, going back to Tamar herself. Now, the verse concerning Tamar then states, she sent to her father-in-law, Judah, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child. Genesis 38:25. And the Gemara comments, and let her say to him explicitly that she was impregnated by him. And Rav Zutra bar Tuvia says that Rav says, and some say Rav Chana bar Bizna says that Rabbi Shimon Chasida says, and some say that Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, famous Talmudic teaching, we've encountered it before, it is more amenable for a person to throw himself into a fiery furnace if faced with the choice of publicly embarrassing another or remaining silent, even if it leads to being burned, and not humiliate another in public, right? It's better to jump in a fiery furnace than to humiliate another person in public. And from where do we derive this? From Tamar. As she was prepared to be burned alive, right, to be punished for what they thought she had done if Judah did not confess rather than humiliate him in public. She thought he would confess. It's not like she was committing suicide rather than name him, but she took the risk that he would not confess rather than humiliate him publicly. Now the verse continues, and she said, discern please, whose are these, the signet and the cords and the staff, right? And the cords, by the way, interesting. I learned elsewhere that the way they would tie their belts, there were a lot of people who didn't have the ability to write or to sign their name, and sometimes even if they did, still their belts would be knotted in a unique fashion, right? Everybody had a unique belt in the way that it was braided, and they could use their belt as a seal, right? Like you could push their uniquely braided belt into wax, right? In the way that like a ring that like in later centuries, a king would have a special ring, right, with the royal seal on it, and he would use that to like seal the wax on a letter. They would use the braided belt, every belt was unique, and so she was referring to his belt when she says his cords, his unique belt. So where am I? Right? So with the use of the word discern, wait a second. So the verse continues, and she said, discern please, whose are these, the signet and the cords and the staff. And Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, with use of the word discern, Judah informed his father that Joseph was lost. And also with use of the word discern, they informed Judah about the signs, right? This measure for measure. Judah was one of the 11 brothers who told their father Jacob, discern please, is this your son's coat, right? Joseph's coat of many colors, which they, after they threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery in Egypt, they then, killed an animal, like a goat or a sheep, and spread its blood on Joseph's coat. And then they presented the coat to Jacob, and they said, discern, please, is this Joseph's coat? Perhaps he was torn by a wild beast, and he's dead, and this is all we have of him. And that's why Jacob, at least outwardly, and maybe there was a part of him that never really believed it, but he went into mourning, for decades at that point, over the loss of Joseph. And that same verb is, now being used against Judah, right? Measure for measure. Discern, please, whose are these, right? And with the use of the word discern, Judah informed his father that Joseph was lost, and also the same word they informed Judah about the signs from Tamar. And the Gemara explains, with the word discern, he informed Jacob his father when he brought him the coat of Joseph, and said to his father, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, this have we found. Discern now whether it is your son's coat or not. And with the word discern, they informed him, Judah, and she said, discern, please, whose are these? And it states, discern, please, na. The word na, please, is nothing other than a language of request. And the Gemara explains, she said to him, I request of you, discern the image of your Creator in every person, and do not avert your eyes from me. And the verse states, and Judah acknowledged them and said, she is more righteous than I. For as much as I gave her not to Shelach my son, this is the same as Rav Chanin Bar Bizna says that Rabbi Shimon Chasidus says, Joseph, who sanctified the name of heaven in private by not committing adultery with the wife of Potiphar, merited that one letter from the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, was added to his name, as it is written, and he appointed it in Joseph, Bechoseph, for a testimony in his name when he went forth against the land of Egypt. Psalm 81. In this verse, the name Joseph is written with an additional letter, He, found in the ineffable name of God. And he continues, Judah, who sanctified the name of heaven in public, merited that his entire name is called by the name of the Holy One, blessed be he. For all the letters of the ineffable name of God are included within the name of Judah, Yehuda, right? So the four-letter name of God that we find in the Torah, Yud, followed by a Hey, followed by a Vav, followed by a Hey, right? And we don't pronounce that name. But those same letters are found in Yehuda, right? Yehuda, they're all the same letters plus the Dalet. So when he confessed, she is more righteous. So all the letters of the ineffable name of God are included within the name of Judah, with the addition of the letter Dalet. And when he confessed and said, "She is more righteous than I," a divine voice went forth and said, "You saved Tamar and her 2 children in her womb from being burned by the fire. By your life, i.e., in your merit, I will save 3 of your children from the fire." And who are they? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Do you remember where those 3 names come from? They're not Judah's children. They're his descendants, and we encounter them in the book of Daniel when they're cast into the furnace and they survive. Now, Judah said, "She is more righteous than I," mimeni. And the word mimeni can also be understood as from me, with Judah thereby admitting that he is the father, right? She's not only more righteous than I, her child that was within her, and in fact it was twins, are from me. Right? He knows he slept with her. And the Gemara asks, from where did he know that it was in fact from him that Tamar was pregnant? I mean, he knows he slept with her. How does he know that she's pregnant by him? And the Gemara answers, a divine voice went forth and said, "From me these hidden matters emerged, and the woman will be the mother of royalty, which requires that Judah be the father." The same verse continues, and he knew her, leda'ata, again no more. He only slept with her that one time, but she became pregnant with the twins. And then he knew her again no more, seemingly indicating that Judah did not engage in sexual intercourse with Tamar again. And Shmuel, the elder, father-in-law of Rav Shmuel bar Ami, says in the name of Rav Shmuel bar Ami, the verse actually means that once he knew of her, that her intentions were for the sake of heaven, he did not desist from engaging in sexual intercourse with her again, as it is written here, "Velo yasaf od leda'ata," and it is written there at the giving of the Torah, "These words the Lord spoke unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick darkness, with a great voice, and it went on no more." Velo yasaf, which is interpreted to mean a great voice that did not cease, right? So this, no more, is it no more he never was with her again physically, or no more he stopped perhaps being with others and he never stop being with her? We don't know. Now the Mishnah teaches Absalom, right? Back to Absalom, we were discussing that there were a few people who had possessed, strength, like Samson possessed this great strength, and it ended up being his undoing. So Absalom, David's son, had this beautiful hair, and it ended up being his undoing. So the Mishnah teaches Absalom was excessively proud of his hair, and therefore he was hung by his hair. And the sages taught, Tosefta 3:16, Absalom rebelled and sinned due to his hair, as it is stated, "Now in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. For the sole of his foot, even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he shaved his head, as it was at every year's end that he shaved it, because the hair was heavy on him. Therefore he shaved it, and he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels by the king's stone. What is the king's stone? The sages taught a stone with which the people of Tiberias and the people of Sippori weigh items. Like, not only was he incredibly handsome, but he had this lush, thick, beautiful hair, and he cut it once a year, and so much grew in a year that it was worth 200 shekels. Now, the Brisa continues, and since he was proud of his hair, therefore he was hung by his hair, as it is stated in the verse describing the battle between the forces of David and Absalom. Right? Absalom went to war with his father, King David, and Absalom chanced to meet the servants of David. And Absalom was riding upon his mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth, and his head caught hold of the terebinth, and he was taken up between the heaven and the earth, and the mule that was under him went on. And after he was spotted by the opposing troops, Absalom took a sword, Sisera, and wanted to cut his hair to save himself. And the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught at that moment the gates of the netherworld opened beneath him, and he was afraid to fall into it. So he did not cut his hair, and instead he was killed by the opposing troops. Right? So his hair, this big hair, snagged on a tree branch. He fell off his mule. He was afraid to cut his hair off to fall, and so the other troops caught him and killed him at that moment. So it is written with regard to David's reaction after he learned of the death of Absalom, and the king was much moved. And he went up to the chamber over the gate, and he wept. Right? It was his son. His son had rebelled against him and, went to civil war against his father, but it was still a father weeping for his son. And as he went about, he said, "Oh, my son, Absalom, my son, Absalom. Would that I had died in your place, O Absalom, my son, my son." 2 Samuel 19:1. And a few verses later it adds, "And the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, O my son, Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son." And the Gemara asks, why are these 8 repetitions of "my son" by David? I.e., to what do they correspond? And the Gemara answers, 7 times he said, "my son," by which he raised him up from the 7 chambers of Gehenna. And as for the 8th time, some say that David brought the head of Absalom close to Absalom's body, and some say that with his 8th mention, David brought Absalom to the world to come. Right? Absalom had done evil in the eyes of mankind, certainly the Jewish people, and evil in the eyes of God. Right? Because his father, David, was the crowned king of England, and Absalom sought to take the crown by force from his father. That is absolutely a transgression. And for that, he merited perhaps to lose his place in the world to come, certainly to spend a long time in Gehenna, right? The purifying fires of Gehenna before one could move on to the world to come. But his father's, crying bitter tears for his son, according to this teaching, lifted him up out of Gehenna prior to the time that he would have required otherwise. And it is written there, now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself the pillar, which is in the king's valley, for he said, "I have no son to keep my name in remembrance." And the Gemara asks, what did Absalom take? And Reish Lakish says he engaged in a bad transaction for himself by accepting bad advice for which he was punished. The verse continues, the pillar, which is in the king's valley, Be'emek HaMelech. Rabbi Hanina Bar Papa says this alludes to the pillar that is in the deep, Amuka, council of the king, Melech of the universe, as God had already decreed in the aftermath of the incident with Bathsheba, that this would occur. Now we're in 11a. We're almost done. Just going to a good stopping point, and so if you've got questions or comments, get them in. And this is as it is written there, "Thus said the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house." And this prophecy was fulfilled, right? This is a prophecy against David in the incident of Bathsheba, because he took another man's wife, right? Uriah, sent him to the front line so that he could have his wife, Bathsheba, And, he had to suffer consequences for that. And the consequence was terrible for King David, that his own son, Absalom, rose up against him, and his troops ended up killing his son. Similarly, you can say about Joseph, who was sent by his father to inquire as to the well-being of his brothers, where the verse states, and he sent him from the valley, Emek of Hebron. And Rabbi Hanina Bar Papa says, from the deep, Amukah, counsel of that righteous individual who is interred in Hebron, meaning Abraham, as it is written, and he said unto Abram, know that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And the journey that Joseph took to his brothers set in motion the descent of the Jewish people into Egypt. And the Gemara continues its discussion of Absalom. And the verse states concerning Absalom, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name. And it is called Absalom's monument to this day. That's 2 Samuel 18:18. And the Gemara asks, and did Absalom not have sons? But isn't it written, and to Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter? How can you say he had no sons, that he had to name a pillar after himself because he had no sons? He had sons. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says he meant that he did not have a son worthy for royalty. Right? Absalom is already thinking about, I'm going to unseat my father, take his throne, and then he's thinking, and who's going to come after me? Who's going to be my heir to the throne? He's really, seeing himself as king. So Rav Chisda said, it is learned as a tradition, anyone who burns the produce of another does not leave a son to inherit from him. And he, Absalom, burned the produce of Joab. As it is written, therefore he said to his servants, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. And Absalom, not only did he do that wicked thing, obviously the main wicked thing he did is try to take David's throne. And he died for that sin, and perhaps he left no heirs either. We're going to leave off that story there and continue on Friday at the regular time for Friday, noon Pacific. All right, let's see if we've got any questions or comments on Sotah, Daf Yud, page 10. Yeah, Paul, interesting that they used the verb to grind in a sexual way, the way it's used, in modern times, in slang, but how sorrowful that they would do such disgusting things, right, that it was the Philistines, right, who were doing this and using Samson, right, to grind their women, right, to impregnate their wives, but Samson, in a sense, brought that on himself because rather than marry a nice Jewish girl, he went for Philistine women. He got Delilah, and it was his undoing. And while he was being punished for that, they gouged out his eyes, brought him to fornicate with all these Philistine women. At least he had one last moment of getting his revenge for that horrific treatment that he suffered in bringing down the walls on the court, the king, etc. Renee, and here I was all set to struggle with Sotah as I did with Yevamos. So far, Sotah is spellbinding. I wish I had started learning Talmud decades ago. The decision to purchase physical volumes of the Talmud has been so worth it. I wish I had started collecting back in Eruvin when I started with you. But you got them now. Right? And what's so great, of course, about having the hard books as opposed to just reading it online. You can always read online. If you didn't bring your volume with you, you're traveling. They're available online at Sefaria. Also, the Steinsaltz entire Talmud that we're reading here is available free on the Steinsaltz app. Right? You can find that online as well. And soon, God willing, it will be available free of charge on the AT app, which Rav Steinsaltz's son is making available to us, and the app is still in development. We're moving it forward. But at any rate, you can't read that on Shabbos, right? But books you can read on Shabbos. And, I don't know how the young people feel these days who didn't grow up with books the way we did. But isn't there just something wonderful and tactile about books, actual books? that you can fill with notes, and then somebody else can find the book with your notes in it later. It's just so, books are great, right? Books are great. I agree with you, Renee. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll gather again tomorrow on Friday, noon Pacific. We're behind now, right? We've fallen a few days behind. Well, at some point, we'll have to do a makeup show with some highlights and do a few pages. But it just seemed a shame to abbreviate our journey through these wonderful pages, as Renee pointed out, in Tractate Sotah. I mean, I agree. They're spellbinding. So at some point, we'll get to material that is maybe a little bit more legalistic and technical, and we'll do a highlight show, or maybe we'll, encounter some pages like we had so many in Nazir that were very short, where it would be easier to do multiple pages in a day. But for now, we'll just run behind a little bit. Aoife asks an interesting question before I sign off. How can a man make love to a woman unwillingly? Meaning, how can the man be forced to make love? Right? In this way that Samson, was forced to impregnate those Philistine women. I don't know. Maybe his willpower was not that difficult to overcome. We know he's attracted to Philistine women. Now he's rotting in a dungeon, blind. And I guess they bring, these women, I wouldn't say good looking, he can't see them. But they place him on his lap, and, maybe that was something that Samson was geared up to do. As we learned from a young age, this was a particular blessing that Samson had, even when he lost the strength which was tied to his long hair. Apparently, sexually, he never lost that ability. And it was that same ability that was his undoing, right? That's the thing that we keep seeing here, measure for measure. Okay, that's what I've got. See you on Friday at noon Pacific. And those celebrating Passover, have a beautiful 7th and 8th day Yom Tov of Passover. Hag Sameach.